All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pets of Politics, Mr. Watson. I am your host, Christian Watson. And today I have with me, I think, someone who cannot be described any other way that is a thought leader in a movement that I believe will be, as time goes on and society gets more and more digital, one of the most enduring movements within contemporary society, and that is the transhumanist movement. I personally like to let people introduce themselves, but I'll just say a few words about our guest. Zoltan Istvan, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Your last name is a little bit tricky to say, but he has been described by several outlets such as the Discovery Channel and so on as the leader of a movement that is trying to beat death. Now, excuse me if that seems a little bit too reductive in my opinion. I think that transhumanism has more about it than just that, but I'll let him explain all of that as the interview goes on. So Zoltan, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So you probably get this question a lot, but we're going to begin with it anyway, just so folks who aren't familiar can get familiarized. What is transhumanism in your opinion, in your words?
Well, transhumanism is a social movement now, many millions of people around the world that want to use science and technology to radically modify the human being and also to modify the human experience. Anything from exoskeleton suits that might get you to the top of Mount Everest to even simple things like driverless cars. But I think more people associate it with things like brain implants and when you lose a limb in a war, we're the kind of people that put on the bionic arm so that you can then play the piano again. So that's really what transhumanism is about. And its number one goal is to try to overcome death with science and technology, but of course has many other goals as well.
And then let's lead into that. What are the other goals of the Transhumanist Project? What is the full extent of it, if you could articulate it in a way?
Sure. Well, I think, ultimately, I think the project would be to kind of create a utopia where everybody would live without disease. Everybody would live without dying unless they, wanted to die. Everyone would live in prosperity and maybe not be completely dependent or dependent at all upon a lot of the biological issues out there. Transhumanists want to make it so ultimately you're not even breathing air. Ultimately, you're not worrying about food because you have a different cyborg body that maybe operates entirely off nuclear fusion or something from the solar, from the sun, or just some other kind of energy that maybe we haven't invented yet. But the point is, we really want to transcend beyond the biological and into either AI or whatever's coming beyond AI, quantum intelligent, whatever, something that's radically different and makes us live dramatically more complex, longer, and I think better lives ultimately.
So that kind of leads me into my next question. What is the transhumanist view about the nature of man and reality? Because these two questions go back, as I'm sure you're quite aware, thousands of years of philosophy, right? The first philosophers, the pre-Socratics contemplated the nature of reality and made some novel observations. Some of them were actually quite correct. Some of them were way off. Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, all of them contemplated about the nature of man. And from their sentiments, the sort of discourses surrounding ethics and politics flow. And so it appears to me that a lot of philosophy began by looking at the nature of man in the context of the nature of reality. So how do transhumanists view those two things?
Well, I think to begin with, nature of reality is, we view it all through an anthropomorphic sense. Like it's in our heads or it's in our world to change, to manipulate, to do whatever we want. So when we talk about reality, it doesn't really matter if it's objective or even subjective or however you interpret it. It's a tool to be used to make our lives better. And I think that's really what's really important about transhumanism is we don't believe in this word natural. There's nothing natural that any transhumanists accept. And so we talk about reality. We don't say, oh, this is reality. We see what is it that we can do to that thing outside of our direct selves and improve it so that our lives can be better. And that takes us kind of back to your second question or first part of the question, which was, what is man? How do we interpret it? Well, I'd say we interpret it as ourselves as just an intelligence. It's a miracle that we're here to be alive through either forces of evolution or maybe even a divine power, if you want to believe that. We have arrived at a place where people can do all these crazy things with technology, create computers, travel around the world on jets and whatever. And we realize that because of the microprocessor growing, maybe not as fast as Moore's law, but certainly still every 18, 24 months, almost doubling. The point is, at some point, 100, 200, 300, 1,000 years in the future, we are going to be very, very different than the biological beings we are now. We're carrying 3 pounds of meat on our head. It's about what the brain and the head weighs. And we know that when we start merging ourselves, our minds, our thoughts directly into servers that can fill up the Empire State Building, all of a sudden we're talking about potential complexity of our brain and our intelligence levels dramatically increasing, maybe becoming 1,000,000 times smarter and 1,000,000 times more complex in our experience of what the universe is. And so that's really what man is. It's or humans are. It's not even. It's very temporary. Everything's changing because of technology changing so rapidly. So what we see today will definitely not be what we see in 100 years from now.
Yeah, and I think this sentiment of yours is reflected in a few of the pieces you've written. You wrote a piece for Vice titled "Liberty Might Be Better Served by Doing Away with Privacy." And if I may, I just want to read part of that piece here. You say, for many decades, the Fourth Amendment has mostly done its job, but privacy concerns in the 21st century go way beyond search and seizure issues. Giant private companies, like Google, Apple, and Facebook are changing our sense of privacy in ways the government never could. And many of us have plans to continue to use more tech. One day, many of us will use neuroprosthetics and brain implants. These brain-to-machine interfaces will likely eventually lead to the hive mind, where everyone can know each other's precise whereabouts and thoughts at all times, because we will all be connected to each other through the cloud. Now, you go on to say that this could actually be a beneficial thing for society, because the dealings of politicians with lobbyists could be known and more transparent and things of that sort. Now, a lot of people, I think this goes back to the fundamental question, this sort of distinction between the public and the private, which has been a huge debate in political philosophy as well, right? The idea, okay, how much does the individual's private life impact society? How much does society impact the individual's private life? What are the demarcation lines, or are there even any lines at all? Is man inherently a public entity? Is he someone who should be shaped by social forces? There's many different answers to this. But the answer that seems to have been settled on upon the American experiment is that the individual is sovereign, but the individual exists within a context dictated by this, what they would call natural law. And this context implies and necessitates certain things. And privacy being one of the many conditions man needs to preserve his life and to live well. Since the Constitution is predicated on this idea, and the general moral framework of the country is predicated on this idea, how does the transhumanist preserve the republic? Or rather, is it even the goal of the transhumanist to preserve the republic at all? Are they trying to reinvent the republic? Right. I mean, yeah, maybe that's the question. Yeah. Maybe that's the question.
No, you're right. You're right. And so, like, if we get into the deeper kind of writings that I've done on where the state is going, I mean, I think we end up with either a very singular global government here within 30 to 50 years, or probably, in my preferred way, much more smaller, like city states, maybe thousands of them across the globe, that sort of follow very long-term general rules that might actually even have its own kind of constitution or something of that nature. And I think, when you start talking about the Constitution, at least in the United States, most transhumanists are like, well, wow, we're going to have to rewrite it. And that's in fact why, during my 2016 presidential campaign, I delivered the Transhumanist Bill of Rights to the U.S. Capitol. And that's really, that Bill of Rights has really gone on to become probably the best known of the, what we call futurist Bill of Rights. And it's because we just simply don't think that the United Nations Universal, Bill of Rights as well, they have something similar, as well as the Constitution, are enough, given that we're moving into a different age where we have bionics, we have robotic eyes, we have lack of privacy because we might have a hive mind, we have people working on brainwave headsets, we have driverless cars, we have bullets that can shoot around the corners because they're now like, there's so many different types of bizarre technologies out there that are changing what seemed unchangeable for hundreds of years. And now all of a sudden we're faced with this reality that technology needs new rules rewritten for it. And so I definitely don't think transhumanists are supporting the preservation of the republic, at least over the long term. Again, it doesn't mean in any way we want to violate rights or have wars or things like that. But I do think that there should be some universal policies that protect all people. I'd like to have no borders. I'd like to walk into any country and be able to be free there, to start a life there, personhood. So when you talk about, even because I do come from a kind of a solid libertarian background, even though it sometimes doesn't seem that way. I want the world to be free, the world to be everyone's oyster, and that requires us dropping a sense of this like walls, a sense of I'm this person and it must only be that way. Technology is changing us too much. And so I feel like transhumanists in a very real way want something very different, much larger than America. And I think much larger than even like, let's say, a global government, which kind of sounds yucky to me too. It's really about the freedom to exist anywhere on the planet in your own way.
Transhumanists want to transcend both political boundaries and the sort of personal boundaries that our current sort of, I'll say, meat condition imposes upon us, right? And they want to do so by reworking the human condition with technology. Would that be a correct claim to make?
Yes, that's okay. Quite correct.
And so the distinction between the public and the private for the transhumanist is pretty much an illusory derivative of our current nature, which doesn't have to be so, right? Because like if you were to transcend our current condition, then ethics would have to follow, medicine would have to follow, every other topic within society that allows society to work would have to necessarily follow, because all those right now are situated around the current human condition. And so this debate between the public and the private, the social man versus the individual man, the sovereign individual versus the collective, would be completely reworked by this sort of new transhumanist condition. How do you imagine it would be reworked? Like, what would that entail in your opinion?
Well, I do agree it's going to be reworked. And that's why I think when people say, oh, the Constitution must last forever, they're really talking about a biological human being, a biological American, let's just say, if we're dealing with only America. But that's just not going to be the future. I mean, the future is going to be cyborgism. People are going to have synthetic parts all over. Their iPhones are going to be in their brains, or at least attached to their brains 24/7. And I feel like just a bunch of new experiences and new not regulations, but new ideas and laws regarding how we live are going to be applied. And I think, you can already start seeing it even in terms of, let's say, crypto, starting to try to challenge the traditional way that we deal with money. But it's not just, that, it's every single field, genetic editing in the field of medicine, the idea that, now we can literally rewire ourselves so we don't get cancer. Maybe that's the way to beat cancer, is not through trying to give us, therapy, but actually to make it so human beings never get cancer in the first place. These are novel and revolutionary ways of looking at the human being. They're just examples of something that's happening in every single field. Like the classic one that because I'm just currently a graduate student at the University of Oxford, and I did a week on environmental studies. And, there's so many people trying to stop global warming, trying to stop climate change. And I believe in climate change and those things too. But the transhumanist doesn't actually want to change the earth. It wants to change itself so that it's not affected by global warming. It doesn't need food to survive. It doesn't, it's just a very different way of looking, and maybe some people will say selfish way, but we want to change ourselves so that we're able to overcome any odds that are thrown our way, even things that might be so dramatic as, climate change in a very severe level. And that's really how transhumanists are approaching everything in their lives.
Yeah, I want to read some parts of the Transhumanist Bill of Rights, and there's about 6 articles, correct? The one I'm having right here, there's about 6 articles of the Transhumanist Bill of Rights. Is that correct, Zoltan?
It is correct. The original one has 6 articles, but since then it's become crowdfunded and now crowdsourced, and now there's like 50 of them. But the 6 are still the basis. But if you read the 6, you'll get the core of it. Okay,
I just want to read some of it. Article 1 says human beings, sentient artificial intelligences, cyborgs, and other advanced sapient life forms are entitled to universal rights of ending involuntary suffering, making personhood improvements, and achieving an indefinite lifespan via science and technology. So that particular article there is pretty interesting, because So, there could be some people would say that the idea of rights is based in, the human condition. It's based in some kind of quality about the human being. And if the transhumanists were to remove that foundation and upgrade it, where do rights come from? What are rights in the transhumanist lexicon? Are they moral qualities that allow us to operate in a morally responsible way in society, or are they simply things that we are entitled to? And if there are things that we are entitled to, upon what grounds are we entitled to them?
Well, I think most transhumanists would say that the non-aggression principle is really where rights stem from, all rights. And the non-aggression principle is this idea that you're simply not allowed to cause aggression or steal someone's stuff or hurt them or whatever in any way. It's just not within your right to do. But outside of that, you can basically do anything as long as it's not hurting someone. And it's kind of like the golden rule, to be honest. And if everybody could start from that kind of basis, we could all do whatever we want. We could grow ourselves into whatever kind of creatures we want, as long as we're not directly hurting somebody else. Now, of course, that's so easy to say in a big metaphysical way that that's how the rights would stem from, because then you get into the nitty gritty of all these little million things that the minutia, which causes all the conflict. But the reality is most transhumanists support this idea of the non-aggression principle, which is, don't steal other people's stuff, don't murder them, leave them alone and let them leave you alone. And society will find a good way to operate.
Yes. Now, the rights in the Transhumanism Bill of Rights, though, particularly Article 1, that says the universal rights of ending involuntary suffering, would you say that people don't have the right not to suffer? Because the non-aggression principle, from my understanding, and just I'll tell you where I'm coming from, I'm also of in the libertarian tradition, very much so. On the more conservative side, of course, but I'm very much libertarian tradition. The non-aggression principle doesn't seem to cover things that go outside of the bounds of the interpersonal. Like, for example, if a tornado were to come through your neighborhood and destroy your house, the tornado couldn't have violated the NAP because the tornado is not a human being and the tornado is just an environmental thing. And suffering seems to be a condition that every human being throughout history universally experiences. Maybe not necessarily so in your case, but it's been the case. So would that necessarily violate the NAP and therefore be a trigger for rights?
Yeah, so just so you know, I have written an article on exactly this thing for the Daily Dot about how the NAP should be incorporating the idea that even though cancer, for example, is impersonal, it is also out to harm you. So therefore, the NAP does allow you to harm someone if they're trying to harm you. I mean, that's widely accepted in the libertarian, I'd say, circles. And that's why the NAP supports us, for example, having a military. We're not allowed to go off to Afghanistan and just defend mineral rights, but we're certainly allowed through the NAP to defend our land if some enemy is coming upon to our houses and, taking our children, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So in that way, though, I have argued that cancer, and even maybe such a thing as a tornado, even if it's impersonal, is coming into our lives, causing us harm. Therefore, we do have a right to fight back that would be supportive of the NAP, to fight back these impersonal things. And this is why I believe there's a universal right to fight back against things, disease and suffering, that the NAP would actually support. It's a little bit more metaphysical. The bridges are more difficult to make and argue, but I think most transhumanists agree that we don't like to say universal rights, because that starts to, the libertarian thing is like, wait a sec, everyone does their own thing. But all of a sudden, when you start talking about cancer affecting every single human being on planet Earth, I do believe there's a universal right to use the power of the NAP in order to eliminate something like cancer or tornadoes, as in your example.
Interesting. So for the transhumanist, it doesn't matter if the harm is coming from a moral agent or a non-moral agent. Harm is harm, and it should all be treated the same way.
Basically, yes. I mean, there might be some.
I don't want to simplify it, obviously, but yeah.
But you're right, though. That's exactly what we're saying, and I don't mean that any kind of harm, like a tiny little fly landing on you and bothering you, but we're talking about the big ones, like bad weather affects millions of people every year and probably kills hundreds of thousands. Cancer kills millions as well. So there are certain things that we could consider on the equivalent of a war, of somebody coming up on your beaches to take your home and your things, and that requires fighting back. And I do believe things, even as big as global warming, or as, and I'm not a big fan of global warming, I'm just bringing it up, but more importantly, like cancer and aging and things like that, the NAP has a real inherent right to fight back against that. And you could say that is a universal right. And that's why we have incorporated it into the Transhumanist Bill of Rights with that terminology.
Okay, interesting. So the NAP for the transhumanist, well, does it begin with our current human condition and then it translates into a broader transhumanist condition? If that is the case, how could you make the case for a sentient artificial intelligence having the right to the NAP?
Well, I think when you start talking about other intelligences, we're just speculating at this point. But my general feeling is that if you come up with an entity and that entity is so similar to yourself that you empathize with it, you're like good friends with it, maybe fall in love with it. I mean, who knows what it is? But if there's something like that, that is so sophisticated and you feel complete connection to it, and then a car comes and just whacks it and runs it right over without a care in the world, it's like our sympathy when we see a baby elephant being attacked by a bunch of tigers. We simply feel that empathy. And I believe that if we feel enough empathy and we have a reason to believe that there's suffering taking place, in that case, the NAP could be used as a defense to try to protect that animal or that artificial intelligence. But again, I don't want to just say it's like some computer. I want to make sure that we've never experienced the kind of AI that I'm speaking about. We're talking about something that would be able to join our conversation and really be able to kind of be one with us and have values too, and also not want to die, and the kinds of things that are important to us. You know, it can't just be some machine. It has to be something that we truly think, wow, this is a buddy of mine. I care about it.
And we would deduce that from how similar it is to us.
I think so. And also just through empathy, in the same way we might deduce animals. I actually think, the NAP applies to certain animals as well, in the sense that, and this is kind of stretching, and maybe many libertarian meat eaters might not agree, but I tend to think that if we really care about suffering and we really care about not being a jerk, either to the planet, to living things, then we have a lot of respect for everything around us. And that goes to whatever creature is out there that might be suffering. And we know when suffering. You kick a dog in the head, you know it's suffering. You can see it whimper away and maybe it's blind because of it. So I think humans, if they see a certain amount of suffering out there, you can start applying the NAP to that and saying, you know what, I want to protect that. I don't want it to come and bite me, and therefore I don't want to go and kick in the head. And even though it's a lesser life form, let's say, and I'd agree with that, it still deserves that protection that the NAP gives. We just, good people don't cause harm to anything outside of themselves unless they're being attacked.
So you would say that you would agree with the animal rights advocates that it's immoral to probably eat meat, I think, because that causes harm to your animals. You have to, unless it's like,
I think
vegan meat, like meat that's like created in a factory or lab, which is still controversial because No,
I agree with you. And I want to be clear. I still eat meat, so I'm guilty. But on a philosophical level, I don't eat much meat. On a philosophical level, I definitely think factoring farming is very much in violation of what the overall meaning of the NAP is. And I think we would do better as a society if we stopped killing 150 million animals a day. And I'm not against eating meat. I think if you raise a cow and it lives in your backyard and you treat it nicely, and then at the end of the day, end of the 5 years, you kill it very, quickly and painlessly, and then I think it's totally okay to eat meat. But I think it's really the way we're doing it right now on such a kind of like industrial level. I mean, 150 million animals every day, just being slaughtered every single day. I was just down in Cabo surfing, and it wasn't a very nice resort, and there was, all you can eat buffets, and people were very, very large, so much obesity all around. And it didn't seem like the way human beings should be. I didn't think that they should just be able to eat as much as they want without even knowing a little bit of the source. But it just kind of goes back to the NAP, the same thing, which is, if you care about the world, you're going to treat it better. You're going to try to treat it not necessarily perfectly, but you're going to treat it in a way that shows respect. And just being 500 pounds and eating as much meat as you want from this very kind of like 3-star buffet, I just didn't think that's the way I want to see humanity.
So there are certain necessary conditions that humans should embrace. And one of those conditions is not getting obese, not gorging on food, not, because under the transhumanist framework, how would that be much of an issue if you could edit out all of those imperfections ultimately? What would be the impulse not to eat as much fried chicken as you want if you could just edit out diabetes afterwards? Not trying to be coy, I'm just trying to, yeah.
No, and it's a great question. And to be honest with you, I feel like if we could edit it out, there is at least more of a moral justification to become 500 pounds and not worry about your diabetes and stuff like that. But right now, we don't actually have that technology. So the transhumanists would say, look, you want to work out every day, you want to eat healthy, you want to take care of yourself, and you want to try to live as long as possible, especially given the nature of where technology is going. I mean, you and I don't know, you look about 30, 40. Hopefully I'm correct.
No.
Oh, are you younger?
22.
22.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. Maybe this is the color.
No.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that.
It's the head. It's fine. I get that a lot.
The point though is, and you don't even need to worry about it. You do look older than you look. But the point is, you don't even need to worry about it because you're probably going to be at that point in 50 years where they actually figure out how to keep you alive indefinitely. But I'm 49 and I'm my dad, had his first heart attack at 57 and died about 10 years later. So I'm starting to approach that age when health is really a big issue, and something could happen, could get cancer or heart disease or heart attack any day. So for me, the next 10, 20 years are incredibly important to try to make it to that point when the technology gets better to keep me alive longer. But the point is, so if you're dealing with somebody now who's just gorging on food, they're not going to make it to 50 years when they actually can take a pill and then live indefinitely. And then they maybe have you seen the movie WALL-E, the cartoon?
Oh yeah, of course.
It's this great movie where Americans become so large and they just eat and gorge and they don't do anything and their lives are kind of useless in a way. And I'm worried that that's what's happening. So the transhumanists would advocate to say, look, do all you can right now to stay healthy, to do things that make you prosperous, to do things that bring you as much excitement and advancement as you can. So there's very much a health kick to the transhumanist movement. But at some point in the future, you're right. When we have all these technologies, who knows? Maybe transhumanists will lead us to the WALL-E place where everyone's fat and can just edit out whatever bad things that they want. But maybe then it's okay, because if you edit it out, you can eat as much as you want. Hopefully, you're just not factory farming 150 million animals a day.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, that creates suffering.
Yeah. One last question, because we're running up on time here. So the idea of the hive mind and transhumanist thought, I've seen it in your articles a lot. How does the idea of the hive mind, well, two questions. How does the idea of the hive mind, A, preserve one's individuality, and B, preserves one ability to use reason? Because reason is oftentimes thought of as one's individual capability to grasp the world. But if we're all plugged into these servers where things are streamlined and we're all connected, how does one preserve that ability, that capacity to grasp the world? And more fundamentally, how does one preserve themselves?
Yeah, no, great question. Look, so I think to begin with, when we talk about the hive mind and everyone's plugged in, you have to realize by the time we get to that technology, which will probably be 10, 15 years, I mean, there's a good chance you and I might do this interview in 15 years' time, and we would just do it through our minds, because that kind of technology that Elon Musk and Neuralink and all these other companies are working on is brainwave technology, and it should be able to do podcasts, just through our thoughts in that amount of time. But the point is, when that technology arrives, artificial intelligence will also probably be here. So already there's little bots all over the place doing things, helping us out, whatever. Maybe they're in Twitter, maybe they're just in your calendar, this and that. But eventually these bots, even if we are connected in a hive mind, will also be like little angels, like Abraham's little angels on people's shoulders. They'll probably help us to make rational decisions, whether or not we're plugged into the hive mind or not. So meaning that if you're, driving a car and something, you have a brain implant or you have a headset or even just a driverless car, it would be able to make a better decision than you would on a very quick split second kind of accident scenario that you might run into, let's say the trolley problem or something like that. And I think very soon, maybe within 10, 15 years, we will all have these kinds of AI assistants all over, helping us be more reasonable people. Maybe saying, you know what, when you cook the fish that way, you don't need to, put this in there or burn this. You could do it this way. Or maybe, when you're cleaning the house or hammering something or fixing something, it will always help us to do the most efficient and rational thing possible. And so I think it's not really only the hive mind is just going to be interpersonal. I think the hive mind is going to be filled with ourselves, other people, and all sorts of AIs and educational or instrumental or whatever you want to call it, things that are facilitating us to be better people and make the right decision. And I think the same thing, like when you wear exoskeleton technology and you run, there's going to be your ability to run, but then there's going to be the AI in the back of the exoskeleton technology that also even allows you to run faster than your brain can do. So for example, I covered what we call the Cyborg Olympics that's put on in Switzerland that runs concurrently with the real Olympics. And it's all disabled people, most people that don't even have legs, that are competing on bicycles. So you have limbless people bicycle riding around a track. And the way they're able to bicycle ride is they put on these artificial limbs, but they don't use, so they're quadriplegic. So they can't ride a bicycle no matter what happens, whether you put an artificial leg on them. But they have an AI device tied into their neural system that allows them to their body to know it needs to ride the bike. And therefore, even though it bypasses the spine, it does tell their legs to move. And what's happening is that they can actually, in some cases, ride a bike faster and more efficiently than they would have through the way their brain would have told them to ride a bike. And that's because the AI knows more about the human body in some ways than even the person does. And so when you talk about like the future, don't think of it only in terms of the way we control our brains right now. Think of it in terms of there's going to be a lot of outside help that's going to be able to help us. Almost think of it like having a calculator accessible to you as you're doing a calculus exam. It just makes it that much quicker. And so I think the hive mind is not just going to be a bunch of people like completely losing their privacy and whatnot, interacting with one another. It's going to be a lot of us, other people, as well as a lot of AIs that really kind of hopefully make us better people and probably make us more complex too. But either way, hopefully more rational than we've ever been as a species, because I can tell you, I think the big thing about human beings is we are pretty irrational at times.
Absolutely. We can be. We certainly can be. Well, thank you so much for coming, Zoltan. I appreciate it. I hope that you'll come back. We can have a longer conversation next time, hopefully. Would you have anything else you'd like to say before we go?
No, just if your viewers want to check out my work, it's at zoltanistvan.com, or just Google my name. Done a lot of writing for the New York Times, plenty of libertarian sites as well. So you can check out some of my articles at Reason and whatnot. So, there's a lot of stuff out there. And I hope, your viewers have, learned something about transhumanism. Yeah, I'd love to talk to you. I enjoyed your philosophical angle. You seem to know your philosophy really well, which is really interesting because I'm actually in a graduate program right now at Oxford doing a philosophy master's in ethics. So I'm immersed sort of in the philosophical, thinking patterns right now. So in fact, just today I'm doing my essay. So I've been like immersed in John Locke and all these other people.
Oh, Locke, wonderful. You can't go wrong reading Locke. Wonderful, wonderful thinker. I did philosophy university, which I just graduated not long ago, but I'm still learning. I'm still exploring on my own. So, I mean, I'm still working on it. So, but I appreciate the compliment sincerely. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for being here. I'm Zoltan, and everyone else, please stay pensive. Bye-bye.